Hello. Branden Harvey here with this week's episode of Sounds Good, the podcast where every single Monday I sit down with an inspiring person and talk about happiness, overcoming struggles, and living a life of intentionality and wonder. Today I'm talking with one of my all-time favorite musicians, Ryan O'Neal of Sleeping at Last. If you haven't heard Sleeping at Last music, well, I think you may be wrong. Ryan's had his music featured in and used by the Twilight Saga, The Fault in Our Stars trailer, Dancing with the Stars, Jane the Virgin, Super Bowl commercials, Ellen DeGeneres, a million episodes of Grey's Anatomy, So You Think You Can Dance, Kid President, and so much more. Outside of making beautiful, hopeful music that makes people feel and think, Ryan is an incredibly thoughtful and creative person, and I loved getting to talk with him. So without any further ado, let's just jump straight into this. Okay, I'm on the line with Ryan O'Neal of Sleeping at Last. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Oh man, thank you so much. I am so excited to talk to you.
So your name is Ryan, and I may have just spoiled this, ruined this, but you are also the entirety of the band Sleeping at Last. Is this correct?
That's true. That is true. I mean, I don't have a Sleeping at Last birth certificate, but it is Sleeping at Last is me and vice versa.
But I didn't spoil any secrets. That's public knowledge.
No, that is not. That is no secret.
Surprise, everybody. Banksy.
It's more of a point of confusion than anything else.
I love it.
Because it does sound like a band name, so.
and I love that. What's the background behind the name? Where does Sleeping at Last come from? I've got no idea.
Yeah, so quite a while ago when I was way younger than I am now, I knew I needed some sort of name for my music, and I went into a bookstore with a friend and completely joking said, all right, whatever page I turn to next in this poetry book is going to be the name of my music. And so I flipped the page once and in this poetry anthology, and it was a poem by Christina Rossetti, and it was called Sleeping at Last. And I totally was not expecting to find something that I connected with or a name that I connected with. And it just made sense. So a few days later I was like, yeah, I think that was actually the way. That was the right path for the name of my music. And it's funny too, because the longer I make music, the more I realize that the name suits the genre of music I'm working on.
Beautiful.
It does get gentler and gentler as I get older. So
that's amazing.
I've always liked quieter music, but this is the older I get, pretty much when I'm 60 or 70 years old, it's just going to be me whispering. No music, it'll just be silence and then a whisper every 3 minutes.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, so the name works well with that.
That's amazing. So how old were you when you came up with Sleeping at Last again?
Oh man, it was probably 16 years old.
That
maybe
is
15
nuts.
years old, 17, 17.
Because how old are you now?
I'm 33 coming up in July. Yeah, so the name has been around for quite a while. And
for a majority of your life, you've been Sleeping at Last.
Yeah, exactly. So which I kind of love, and then I also the business side of that is probably not super smart, because you want to be the young, the hot buzz band of the whatever, and having the name been around for so long, it probably doesn't work well with that. But to be fair, it did start out. So I've always been the songwriter, and it's always been my voice. But it started out as a band with my brother and my friend Dan, and so they moved on to other things a few years into it. But so I carried on the name Sleeping at Last, which I sort of say is my journal. Yeah. So that's kind of where I put all of my every thought that I have is in these songs. So I kept the name going. So that's why it is a band name, because it was a band, and now it's just a solo dude.
I've followed you for a long time. I've been a fan of your work. I did not know any of this. And this is normally
awesome.
some of the first stuff that you figure out about a band. Why are they called
my
that
secret
thing?
past? Yeah.
Man, that's great. Okay. And so you and I were talking about this before we started recording, but I really don't remember when you and I first connected.
Me neither, yeah. I feel like it could have been through, was it through Bob Goff?
It might have...
Maybe a Love Does event. Or
Yes, in Seattle.
I think that might have been it. Yeah,
That's probably
'Cause
it.
I feel like we started talking to each other over Twitter or maybe Instagram or something since then. And then I don't know, for some reason it just felt like we've known each other for a lot longer. So every time I feel like I consider you a friend. I don't know if that's okay, but you're my friend.
I consider you a friend. I'm honored. I'm honored that you consider me a friend, but I consider you a friend for sure.
That's the magic of like just getting to meet cool people and technology.
Okay, so I want to back up from the conversation of you and me and our little friendship love story and talk about you and Sleeping at Last in music. My kind of go-to question probably would have been like, how did you get started? Like, how did you pivot into music? But it sounds like as a teenager, you jumped into music. So more so I want to ask, like, what was the first big break you had? Like, what was the first moment that blew your mind in your pursuit of music?
Yeah, so I was really, really fortunate when I was I think I was 17 or 18. So this is just a couple years after the name Sleeping at Last was around, and I was writing my own songs and all that stuff. I played a show at a venue in Chicago called the Metro, and after the show, we were backstage, and I saw Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins walk by, and I grew up on the Smashing Pumpkins. I was a huge fan, so it was a big, a big moment. I was like, oh my gosh! We were pretty sure he didn't hear the actual show that we played, but we were debating whether or not I should give him a CD. So I ended up, rallying and kind of pulling the courage together to hand it to him. Actually, I was in the middle of talking to a security guard about whether or not I should do that, and he walked by like as I was asking the question. So I was like, "I'm sorry, can I give this to you?" And
Amazing.
So Billy was super sweet, and he took the CD and said, "It was nice to meet you," and then that was kind of it. But then the next day, I think it was the next morning, I got a phone call from his assistant and said, "Hey, Billy loved your demo that you gave him, and was interested in getting together with you to work on some stuff if you were interested in that." And so that was like just a really validating opportunity to, one of my musical heroes, thinking that what I did wasn't terrible.
That's unbelievable.
So that led to a friendship with him, and he actually told a bunch of record labels about Sleeping at Last, and that led to some showcases, and so eventually I ended up signing with Interscope Records. This was really early on.
Wow!
And so that was just such a hugely informative year and experience of my life, not only musically but just like as a young person turning into an adult. Like it just taught me so much, and in retrospect, it blows my mind that anybody would have taken like a young artist under their wing at that point. And so it was really cool that he did that. So that was my first. I mean, there was smaller moments that I felt like, oh my gosh, like I might be able to do this for a living, but it was really that moment that made it really seem possible and likely that I might be able to give this my best shot. So
that's incredible. And so you kind of found success, or like so-called success, at an early age. Did you ever, and I don't want to say that like what I found as success, but like for me, I started shooting photos professionally when I was 16 years old. And,
oh, so cool.
And that was like really, that's basically been the only job I've ever had, minus a few like short-term odds and ends here and there.
Yeah,
like,
totally. That's awesome.
What's your, like, have you had to work other jobs? Have you always just been a musician? What does that look like?
I have. So I've always been a musician, and I'm like half, I'm sure you feel the same way, but I'm half like super proud and super embarrassed that I've never had like a real job.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's me too.
I've never had to like wake up super early and do something that I don't love doing, which is I even as hearing myself say that, like I need to every day wake up so grateful and thankful that I get to do this. But so yeah, I went straight from I guess 16, 17 years old that I knew I wanted to do music, and these opportunities kind of came along, and then that just kind of propelled it into being like, okay, no matter what it takes, like this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to do, and thankfully I've been able to do it for quite a while. So I'm hoping that people will continue to listen to my music, so I can continue on that path. But I do feel like I've won the lottery in that regard.
It's amazing. It's really cool. What do you think that it is that gave you that ability to make this your life? Like, it's probably a weird question to ask, but do you think it's the passion? Do you think it's the drive? Do you think it's luck? Like, what? And you can just be like, oh, I played the fifth. Like, I'm not going to brag about myself. That's okay.
No. There's some like really logical things. Like my parents, specifically my mom, was like the most supportive person of, if I told her, hey, I want to build rocket ships, like she'd be like, all right, let's figure out what a rocket ship starts with. Like, what do you need? So she has always been that way. And that's been like a huge, not only just emotionally as like a massive, just like confidence thing for a kid growing up with that, but also on a more practical level. Like she probably she definitely let me live in my parents' home for longer than probably most people should. And so that on a practical level was a huge help in me pursuing this and having a really decent shot at it. And then I think luck is a huge thing. I mean, I guess the luck has different meaning, but I call it it being a gift that I get to do this, and so I felt like it was a blessing. But at the same time, I also feel like the passion and drive. Like right around the time I was probably 18, I remember somebody asking me. I was having, I think I was kind of burning out. I was making that record for Interscope Records, and it was my first like big opportunity, and there was just so much anxiety around it. I put way too much pressure on myself, and there was actual pressure as well. But I just remember feeling like I just kind of went through a little bit of a darker place where my voice wouldn't work, and my body kind of shut down for a little bit. And so I remember talking to a stranger about music. He was just like a friend of a friend that I think we went out to. He was in the car of some, we were going out to dinner with somebody else, and he just happened to drop us off. It was like this really brief interaction, and he was going on and on about how what a beautiful like miracle that I get to do this job, like, and what else would I do, and I like that for some reason that just like stuck with me. So from then on, like I always just, whenever I'm discouraged by whatever challenge is coming up with Sleeping at Last or music or whatever, I just remember that, like there literally isn't anything on this earth that I'd prefer to be doing for work.
That's
like
beautiful.
I love music, and I love being able to express whatever's going on in my head in these songs. And so I feel like it's a combination of all those things that probably luck has the most to do with it.
And so you kind of went down this path, and I think that one of the big things that I've noticed about a lot of the work you do, obviously you're creating, and we'll get into this later, but you're creating so much music at such a fast pace, and it's incredible. But this other thing that's really unique to you is that you're creating music for so many television shows and movies and trailers and commercials that I like know about. It's not just like no-name stuff. It's like, oh, here's Grey's Anatomy, here's Jane the Virgin. How did you get into that world of things? Because I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, that's been one of the great joys of doing this too, because I'm a huge TV and movie fan. I always have been, and so it is like my it's like the area of art or the format of art that I don't know a ton about because I don't do it, so I get to fully just appreciate it. Like I get to like be a complete just audience member for that, as opposed to music, or like I love photography, and so I haven't really pursued it, but I've learned more about it. But filmmaking and all that kind of stuff is just stuff I really, really love. So whenever when I started getting those opportunities to have my music be a part of some of these TV shows and movies, it was just like it still is like the coolest, like it's like my favorite merger possible for music.
Incredible.
But it started with, so my first placement on a TV show was actually it was a show on Warner Brothers. This is probably 10 years ago, called Tarzan. It was like a live action Tarzan. It had one season. It got canceled very quickly. And I remember I think we were on tour at the time, and I remember being in a hotel room listening to it, like waiting for it to come on the air, and it was so quiet. It was like literally on a radio in like 2 rooms over from the scene.
Oh my
it was
gosh.
Like the biggest like bummer, but we still felt like it was, wow, this is so cool. It's on TV, and so that was like the first one, and then nothing for 4 or 5 years, and then I got an episode of Grey's Anatomy, and it was a better placement, but it was still very background, but it was like I really thought, I'm like, this is, oh man, what a cool opportunity, and hopefully this will lead to this and this and this, and you know, it never does. Whenever you think that way, nothing will lead to. You just can't predict any.
It's
of this
always
stuff.
the surprises that lead to stuff.
Oh man. Absolutely. So after that Grey's Anatomy placement, there was nothing, 0 placements for 3 years.
Wow.
And then, so around that time, I guess this was probably 2010, 2011, I had the idea to, rather than continue making records, I wanted to just do series of music. I wanted to write just all the time. And that ended up putting my music, because there was so much new stuff coming out, and ended up putting Sleeping at Last on the radar for a lot of different people in film and TV, and that sort of led to another placement and a TV ad and more placements. And so it's been a really, really fun part of the career. Like I always joke that it's just like I have a studio in my basement, and that's where I make all my music. So it's fun to be able to like sit there and kind of, you know, figure out music and then go upstairs and watch it on TV sometimes.
That's incredible.
It's a huge gift for sure. Man.
And you just mentioned this, but you basically are creating music in series now. And I've never seen anybody do anything like this. And so first of all, why did you decide to start creating music this way instead of the traditional, like, release an album every 2 or 3 years? And then also, like, how do you maintain that? Like, that's crazy.
So it actually started as just like a creative challenge. I had a conversation with my friend David Hodges, who is an incredible songwriter, and he just his output per year of songs is it's incredible, and he's so passionate about songwriting. And so when we first met, this was probably 2009. He asked me, he's like, "Hey, how many songs do you write a year?" Because he was familiar with a little bit of Sleeping at Last work, but I was like, oh yeah, feeling pretty proud of myself. I'm like, I write like 4 or 5 songs a year. And then I was like, how about you? And he's like, oh yeah, well, you know, I write like 100.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, what? And the crazy thing is, like, something clicked over the following months that just like, that's my favorite part of the whole career. Like I love the creating, I love the writing, I love processing everything I'm going through in song, and so. It just struck me as really bizarre that I don't do that more often. So why am I only writing 4 or 5 songs a year? So I decided to figure out, like, okay, what is doable? Like, what's a big commitment or jump creatively that I can make that actually is doable, that I won't completely fall on my face? And so I came up with the yearbook, which is 3 songs every month for a year. And I took like a subscription for it. And so I knew that I had to write 3 songs. And my only criteria was that I had to be very, very proud, actually genuinely proud of the things that I put out.
Amazing.
And so it was so hard. It was like one of the hardest creative years, obviously, ever for my life. But it just, like, every time I hit a wall of writer's block or any of that kind of stuff, which was pretty much every song or every month, I just kept waiting it out, and I would get through to the other side and realize that no, like, there's still quite a lot to say, you know?
So how many songs are you writing per year now at this point?
So it started with that 36 for yearbook, and then that led to the project that I'm working on right now, which is kind of an even more like long form series of music. It's called Atlas.
Yeah.
And so the first year contained 30 songs, and then the second year, which is what I'm currently in, is called Atlas Year 2. And it's 25 songs over the course of essentially a year. It's a little longer. And what's interesting about this, or what I'm excited about this project, is that it's kind of a concept series. Mm-hmm. So Yearbook was just about me writing 3 songs every month, and whatever's going on in each of those months, that's what I was writing about, and that's what came out. With this project, Atlas, I'm trying to tell like a thematic story, of like an overarching story through the themes of the songs. So in Atlas 1, it starts off with an EP called Darkness, which represents the unknown and, you know, the things that we don't understand in our way back history. And then Light represents the beginning of all things, whether you call that the Big Bang, or you call that God, or you call that the beginning of the universe, essentially. And then the next EP is a song for each of our planets in the solar system. And then we get closer and closer to Earth. So I do a series called Oceans, which a song for each of the oceans on Earth. And then now in Atlas Year 2. So Atlas Year 2 is about the involuntary human development of people. So you're born with your gender. You're born with these senses, 5 senses. You're born. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Enneagram.
Yeah. I love Enneagram. What number are you?
Oh, awesome. I'm a 9. What are you?
I'm a 7.
A 7.
I think
that
Sammy might be
sense.
a 9 actually.
Awesome. 9. I'm proud. I'm a proud 9.
What's the name of 9? Is 9 Peacemaker?
9's the Peacemaker.
Okay.
Yeah. So the flaw of the Peacemaker is running far, far away from conflict to a point of being very, very unhealthy.
And I'm the enthusiast. And Sammy was making fun of me last night. Wait. So we should back up a tiny bit. For people who haven't heard of Enneagram is this really cool, almost ancient personality type. So it's like Myers-Briggs, but the thing is that your personality type, like there's 9 options, it will never change. And you can basically become a healthier or less healthy version of your type. So I'm a 7, I'm an enthusiast. I can become a super healthy enthusiast. And I like to think I'm moderately healthy right now. But then the cool thing is, if like my wife Sammy sees me in a place where like I'm being my unhealthy self, then she knows that there's external stresses and pressures on me. And she can kind of say, how can I help alleviate this? Like in her mind, that's kind of what she can do. And the same goes for her. Or like now, because Ryan's the same as my wife, I can say, Ryan, like I can tell that you are like a super unhealthy 9 right now.
Oh no, you can tell through this interview? Oh man, you probably can.
I really am not that good yet. But anyway, it's so fun to like get to know people.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It really is. I mean, you beautifully said it already, but it is such a helpful tool in understanding not only yourself and kind of where you're at on a level of like healthy patterns or unhealthy patterns, but it's such a helpful understanding of others. Like for me and my wife Kate, like Kate's a 3. And so just even understanding how each of the 9 types integrate or disintegrate into each other, like it's so helpful to see, like, I mean, same thing like you said, like she'll totally recognize in me, like there's, something's a little bit off if I start showing some of these specific, moods or just these different little warning signs, and same thing with her. So and it also helps settle some old arguments too about like I think our inclination for, or our hope for every relationship is for people to just understand a little bit more from like our perspective.
Amazing.
And Enneagram allows you to understand things from other people's perspective. It's a great exercise in empathy. Exactly. But yeah, so this year of Atlas is kind of about all of the involuntary parts of us. So like you said, Enneagram is one of those things where you're kind of born into this type or this energy of Enneagram, and that you kind of fluctuate just from health or a lack of health in that type. So I'm doing a song from each of the perspectives of those 9 types.
No
which
way.
will be really, really fun.
What?
Yeah. So that's how the Atlas Year 2 ends. So it's the 5 senses, the 4 basic human emotions, and then Enneagram.
Incredible.
And then next year is about the voluntary human development. So the things that we do with all of that, like love, create, dream, build, like all that's kind of the 3rd chapter of Atlas.
Man, I love that. That's so cool, because I've been listening to all of Atlas. I've loved it, but I actually wasn't following the pattern necessarily. Like
no, it's kind of funny because it is overly complicated. Like I always joke that like all I want people to know is that there's new music coming out. The thematic stuff is just super fun for me creatively to like have a little bit of a jumping off point for writing.
Yeah.
Also, I just get I do a ton of research about each of these different subjects. So I just a few weeks ago got to go on like this 3-day Enneagram retreat with Richard Rohr and friends. And
shut up.
And it was just so fun to like soak up these brilliant minds thinking about these specific things, and then try to interpret those things in songs.
And that was almost going to be what I wanted to pivot my question into is, I, as somebody who's trying to create more and more things, like I think I'm trying to become more of like a creator and less of like an emailer or a business person. I just want to create art. And so even today I sat down at my desk in the morning and I was like, I'm going to write. And I had such a hard time getting things out there. What what advice, I guess, do you have for me as somebody who wants to create things on a consistent basis? You know, what are a few little pockets of wisdom from somebody who's creating 30 songs a year?
Man, so for me, I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but I know like the more time I take off in between writing or creating, the more nervous and scared of the process I become.
Totally.
So that's actually part of why I stopped doing albums, because I'd record one record and then go talk about it for 2 or 3 years, and you'd tour and you'd figure out how to perform those songs live, and then but when it came time 2 or 3 years later to record some new songs and start writing again, I just was so freaked out. I didn't know if I could do what I did before, or if I could hope to top it. It just was it would shut me down. So creating all the time is such a huge thing. There's a book called The Artist's Way. I think it's Julia Cameron. Are you familiar with that?
Sammy's going through it right now.
Oh, cool, man. Well, I think that's like the practice of the morning pages is such a huge, beautiful help. And I've said this so many times, and I'm going to misquote it, but it's somebody that not only am I going to misquote it, but I don't even know who said it originally.
I love it. Well, if you're going to misquote it and you don't know who said it, then it's essentially your own quote.
Then it's my own quote. I'm actually going to just like put my name right by it right now.
Perfect.
There's this book called Songwriters on Songwriting, and it's a book about basically the songwriting process for all these different like legendary songwriters. So everybody from Paul McCartney to Tom Waits, and I'm not sure if he's in there, but it's everybody that you can, Paul Simon, everybody you can think of that is considered like a genius songwriter. And the theme and through the whole thing that I read this really, really young, and I'm so glad I did, because it has always been like a comfort. But the theme through all of these interviews is that nobody knows what they're doing at all. and one of those people said that songwriting and creating in general is like waiting for a bus. Like you hope that the bus is going to come. There's no guarantee. You can't control it. You can't figure it out, but you can make sure you're at the bus stop. Like the waiting at the bus stop is like the key to creating. You just make sure you're ready to get on there. Like that's all you can do. So that's advice that I have like held tightly. Just always create and always keep trying in spite of it feeling like it's not productive or good or whatever. I swear, like 98% of the things that I create, I don't like, and then the other 2% is the stuff I release.
When you're creating all these songs, how many fragments of songs do you think that you write then? I mean, that's probably not a quantifiable number.
No, totally. I don't know if I have a number, but I think the older I get, the better I get at recognizing whether or not a song's there or not. So if there's like something I'm working on for a couple hours, I'll realize pretty quickly if it's worth spending any more time on or not. So I don't let songs go too far without like really believing in them, That's
smart.
So thankfully, but there are thousands of song starts that I write that are just like, wow, that is awful.
Oh man.
So bad. And same thing with lyrics. I approach lyrics and music separate at first, and then later on I kind of figure out the how they correspond with each other. But lyrics too, I try to free write as much as possible, and that I feel like I love what The Artist's Way says about, if you write whatever 3 pages a day, you're kind of scraping off the top of your brain, like all that excess stuff that isn't very good. And you can there's no pressure to do it. You can even write like, I don't want to write all day. Yeah. Just keep writing that down. And just the practice of that can eventually turn into something that's actually meaningful.
Man. Dang, you've got me totally talked into that now. Like Sammy's been telling me to do that for a while, but I think you're just like the little straw that broke the camel's back, but in a positive way.
Us nines, me and Sammy have to unite.
That's true. Yeah, I mean,
we're getting the morning pages out there.
Julia has to just take all the nines and have them come together to market her book.
She has like the 9 street team.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so all of your music, it's coming from all these different themes, but obviously they're very unified in their sound and they're coming from your voice. But the other unifying thing that I'm noticing about them is that you really do have a hopeful approach to music. And, besides the fact that we're friends and I think you're awesome, that's a huge part of why you're on the show, because you more than any other musicians I listen to, you take just a uniquely hopeful approach. Tell me about is that part of your thought process? Is that just coming from who you are? Where's that coming from?
Man, thank you, first of all, for saying that. I realized like a few years ago that no matter, especially with these different themes that I'm writing off of, like no matter how dark because I naturally like sadder songs, and I naturally like more melancholy type of stuff in general. Like I always sort of gravitate towards it. So I realized pretty early on though that no matter what I try to do, there's like hope always kind of comes through. Which I'm really, really grateful for. At first, I was kind of like, "Wait, what is this thing? I'm trying to say something dark here," and then all of a sudden, like some resolution comes in the end of the song.
That's great.
Now I embrace that. Like I'm super glad that it happens, and thankfully, it just does kind of just naturally come out. And I would say now it's also something that I'm proud of. I feel like it's what I want to convey in my music. I want people to be able to find hope, and I want people to be able to feel understood in some way. And I feel like all that hopefully would come from vulnerability and just trying to be as authentic in the writing as I possibly can. And so that's kind of I would like to say that it's naturally come through in the music.
I like that it started off a little bit reluctant.
Yeah. Like I'm actually right now. I'm writing a song for each of the 4 basic human emotions. So I just finished Joy, which is totally hard for me to write because I'm especially like joyful music is like you either have that gene in you or you don't. And my songs are generally a little bit sadder. But right now I'm working on Sorrow, and I feel so much more at home and
wow,
in writing a sad song. But I was very happy that I was able to research some joy, and my daughter, who's a year and a half, was pretty great research material. She's joyful all day, every day.
Well, okay. So speaking of your daughter, is your daughter is your firstborn, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, so I was talking to my producer today, and I was like, "Hey, I'm talking to Ryan today. Anything you think I should ask him?" And he's like, "You have to get him to tell the story of how he announced." The birth of his first daughter, or announced that like him and his wife were pregnant.
Oh man,
can you share that story?
So at the end of Atlas Year 1, which I said was all about Earth and all about kind of the formation of the universe and those songs. It ends with the oceans, and the ocean songs are all instrumental. I felt like that would be appropriate for that theme, and at the very, very last song, I believe it's the song Arctic for the Arctic Ocean. It leads into Atlas Year 2. It's the last song leading up to that. And so right around that time, we found out we were pregnant with Lily, our firstborn, who's now a year and a half. But we took her heartbeat from our first ultrasound and put it in that song. So that was kind of part of our announcement. With that song came out right around that time, and then that led to we thought that was I love the idea of that being the segue from oceans into life.
That's beautiful.
So yeah, and then actually following that, I wrote the song Life, which is the beginning of Atlas Year 2, and that's actually Lily's birth story. So the whole song is sort of the moment that we went into the hospital, and her birth story is in there, and it's kind of a prayer for her, or it's kind of her song, even though many of my songs are definitely written inspired by her and for her, but this one was a little bit more direct.
Absolutely incredible. I really love that. That's really sweet.
Thanks, man. I don't know. Is that the story?
No, that's exactly it. Yeah. Okay,
good. Because I was like, dude, I think when we actually announced it on Facebook, because nowadays you have to do like campaigns. It's like this is our new product.
For real, that's exactly how it feels. After I proposed, we waited an entire week to share stuff online because we were like, I mean, not necessarily because we were trying to like market it or anything, but we were just first of all, we wanted to keep it like secret for a little bit to tell everybody. And then we were kind of like, well, let's like do it with a good photo.
Do it out.
Oh wait, let's figure out what our caption is. It's so cheesy, but
we put a lot of work into our campaign for Lily. And we did for we're actually pregnant with our second little one, who's going to be due in October. Yeah,
so
end of
exciting.
I'm pumped. It's going to be fun, and it's another little girl. So we're super excited. It'll be a lot of cute going on.
A lot of cute. That's so sweet. So something that I've noticed looking from the outside in, because I studied marketing and advertising in school, and so I have a little bit of a business brain. But it seems that you have the most unique business model for what you do. It seems like you really don't tour. You license a lot of your music. You've built a community of people who are excited to download your music when it comes out. What was your thought process on doing this? And then, like, what's the upside? Because I would imagine that this is really cool to allow you to be at home and to be with family, and
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I love the business of music too. Like, I feel like it's I'm not nearly I definitely sometimes I pretend like I know how to do it, and I realize that I really don't. But I do get really excited about it. Like, even that first yearbook project that I was talking about, the series of music, when I started doing that, that creative structure led to like the creation of the subscription model for that. Like, it just was kind of a means of doing it. It's like, okay, well, there's a lot of music coming out. Well, we have to figure out some way to communicate with the audience that is interested in that. And so what does that look like? And so that has led to, that's an instance where like the creative has informed the business end of it. But I get really excited about the business stuff, and I have amazing help from my manager who's way better at business than I am. But it's a really great team. So we just sort of like, I don't know, especially for not touring as much anymore, that has mostly been a result of just creating all the time, which is more of just a decision that I just want to make stuff more frequently. And fortunately that led to the TV and film licensing, which has just been, so it was like I don't want to say it was unintentional, because this is definitely what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to create more, but I didn't have it all laid out in my head as to how to do that. So I'm just very, very grateful that by pursuing it, it led to a career that I get to be here at home working when our daughter's growing up, and I get to be a part of all of her firsts, and that's like feels like such a gift. So and it makes touring even more special too, because I get to do it when I want to rather than it being necessary. So but yeah, I can't even like claim responsibility for it being like this really smart move, but I'm thankful that it has landed the way it has and continues to. So
that's great. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's probably not even a helpful answer.
No, it's fascinating to me, and I love that you're able to do that, and that you're able to be home, and it's not the traditional music lifestyle, and it's not even like it's not even really the glamorized lifestyle. Yeah,
no, totally. Like it is, but I remember maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, the band Wilco, like they're in Chicago as well, and they
I've seen the Wilco buildings in Chicago.
Oh, nice, of course. They like, from the outside, I always just thought like, wow, like they have a really like it's seemingly strong family life, but they seem to be making a lot of music, and they I don't know if touring is a necessity for them or what, but so I always kind of looked at like, oh man, I would love to try to make a career that looked a little bit like that. And so that was some of the, I guess, the seed of trying to figure out what was next for Sleeping at Last. And but yeah, it's a weird thing, because I always struggle with scarcity versus abundance. Anytime anything goes well in my life, I'm like, all right, lock down the fort. It's all gonna end tomorrow, so everybody don't get used to this, and I'm learning to like value and trust and appreciate abundance. Like, just to really, I feel like it's a disservice to not enjoy the good that's put into our life, and so I'm trying real hard to lean into that, and not go into like this mode of fear.
Me too, man. Me too.
But it's hard. It's a weird, I don't know. I'm sure it has something to do with like earlier wiring, but it's a lot of undoing that wiring going on.
It's okay. We've got some time.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Okay, so right now you're finishing off Atlas Year 2. You've got a baby on the way, but what's kind of long-term next for you? Do you want to get into more composing? Do you want to continue series? What does this look like for you?
I definitely think that continuing series is fun for me. I mean, I've got Atlas, like I said, will go on till at least year 3. So I know that's coming ahead, but long term, I think that, as long as people will continue to listen to the songs I write, like I think I'll be doing it anyway. You know, I have to. Yeah. It's now it's become such like a therapy for me that I think that if all of the listeners disappear, I'd still probably be doing that. But I think long term, I would love to do more film composing. I've got a couple opportunities coming up this year that I'm excited to try out.
So fun.
More film composing, and I did my first feature length film last year called Many Beautiful Things, which is a documentary that was really, really beautiful. No pun intended. And so I would love to do more of that. I would like it's weird. I'm excited about the things I don't really know about yet. You know, like I'm trying really hard right now to focus on like balancing the input and output, because obviously these series of music lead me to like tons and tons of output. Like that's like the name of the game for me every day is like, okay, I got to beat this deadline. I've got to create. And I'm realizing probably later than I should that like it's equally or even more important that I value input and try to soak up more stuff, you know, try to make sure that I'm inspired. And I've never written with a lack of inspiration, but I'm trying to make a bigger effort towards seeking out inspiration and seeking out like researching these different themes. And so I'm hoping to do that long term, and hopefully we'll have a lot more to say.
I really love that. I think that the research component of what you're doing is so fascinating. You know, you've talked so much about the universe and space and all these planets, and I just love to imagine somebody who's, you know, like a musician, like reading through textbooks and scrolling Wikipedia, and that's so good.
Thanks, man. I call it research, but I mean it's mostly fun because I watch so many documentaries and videos about stuff, and like so far there hasn't been a theme that I've had to research where I'm like, man, this feels like school. Like I don't want to be doing this. It's super fun, and it sounds cooler if I call it research rather than like, oh yeah, I watched a video. No, just kidding.
Well, on that note, I do want to transition into these questions that I ask people every single week. Yeah. And for the sake of making this transition crazy smooth, I'm going to switch the order around. What are you consuming that you love right now?
Oh, okay. I just read a book by my friend Mike Foster. It's called People of the Second Chance. Yeah. And it comes out later this fall, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and I'm really excited for people to get their hands on that. I'm sure you're familiar with Science Mike.
Yes.
McHargue. I think he's a friend of mine, so I call him Mike McHargue. Is that correct? Are you familiar with how to say his last name?
It's sometimes in my brain when I read it, I say Mike McHargue, but I would imagine that's not correct. And
I think Mike McHargue might argue that. Get it? You see it? Oh. Okay, so definitely please delete that.
We're keeping that joke in for sure.
It might be Mike McHargue. Maybe. And I think I've asked him, so it's good on me for remembering.
But Science Mike is a great thing to call him because it's very Googleable.
Exactly. So a friend of mine named Science Mike is putting out a book later this fall as well that I got an opportunity to read early, and it's so great, and it tells his story, and so those book-wise, that's been keeping me extra inspired. And then I have a deeply rooted passion for Pixar films.
Oh, I know that. I follow your newsletter. I know that you recommend every Pixar movie that comes out.
Oh my gosh. They're like, part of having kids actually was like the thing that I was one of the things I was most excited about was like, oh my gosh, I get to make people and show them Pixar movies. Like, welcome to Earth. Here's Pixar, the best of. Oh. And Lily's actually, she's old enough now. We took her to her first movie, which is Finding Dory, and she loved it. And she's watched movies at home, but that was the first like theater movie. And she just like is obsessed with The Good Dinosaur. Aww. And so Pixar, like as a company and just their creative philosophy and their art and just the care that they put into the story, and man, I endlessly am inspired by what they do. So that's another part of inspiration right now.
Man, those are good things.
Thanks. And actually, so I mentioned earlier, but I got to spend a little bit of time with Richard Rohr, and so reading a little bit more of his writings has been hugely inspiring as well. So
Man, I'm going on vacation next week, and maybe I'll pick up a Richard Rohr book to take with me, because that actually sounds really interesting.
Oh, cool. I mean, Falling Upwards is what I just read, and it's wonderful.
That's cool. I'll have to check that out. Question number 2 / normally number 1. How would you describe the kind of person that you most admire in the world?
Oh, that's really hard. I would say, man, they sound like such cliche words, but loving, compassionate, like those are the people. And I feel like that are confident in their voice in the world. Like those are things that I feel like are like, I always admire the people in my life that are that way, and try to glean as much of that as possible. That's great.
I fully feel the same way. I think that there is something interesting about that keyword of like confident in their place in the world, because when I'm like picking people for this podcast, I would never like put in the show description, I'm looking for people who are confident in their, or like Branden has interviews
like confident, powerful people.
We're having interviews with people who are confident in their place in the world, but that is something that is really admirable, and I think that it says something about maybe their understanding of their identity. It's saying...
Yeah, and I almost mean it in like humility, like in a way that they're like confident in who they are, and that creates this like humility to not only like understand who they are, but also to move forward and do their whatever their gifting is,
Yeah, man, well said.
That's probably a terrible answer, but you can do with that what you will.
I'm just going to edit all of this to be really controversial.
So smart. Yeah.
The opposite.
It'd be like, I hate Richard Rohr. Like, whoa.
We're just adding like me saying hate, or a little robot saying hate. My last question is, based on the ways that you've chosen to step out and live your life differently, what's one thing you'd encourage someone else to do in their own life today?
So I recently heard, and Richard Rohr said this, and I don't know, I think he was quoting somebody else, but it has been like recently proven that negativity is sort of like Velcro in our brains. Like we cling to it. We wanna like wrap ourselves in it. And like goodness and joy is actually more like Teflon. Like it just slides off of us. And it's proven that if you choose to savor something positive for 15 seconds or more, it actually has like a positive impact on your life and your brain.
Wow.
And so I feel like that's a really like solid like day-to-day effort. It's something that people should try, and something that I'm constantly working on right now. But
so how do I practically do this? What does that actually
I feel
mean?
like it's like the most generic example I can think of would be like if you see a sunset. Like I think it's so likely. I mean, you're actually probably better at this because your eye is constantly like scanning for beauty, and you are savoring it in photography and in what you do. And I think I try to do that in music. But if you see a sunset, and like I think that our natural response is like, wow, that's beautiful, and then you're done. You know what I mean? And then you move on and you make a phone call or you check your email or whatever. I think it's just a conscious like, okay, I'm gonna take a little bit more time for that, that kind of thing. And another thing that I've been trying to meditate every day, and I hesitate even saying the word meditate because for most of my life I've sort of felt like I don't get it. I don't know how people meditate. And I figured like there's this app called Headspace, and I love it, and it's 10 minutes every day. It's like this guided meditation app for iOS, and I'm sure it's for other devices as well. And it's like just this really simple breathing and being aware of your surroundings. And like for me and my personality, sitting still for 10 minutes is really hard. I'm always like, right now my leg is tapping. Like I'm just there's always something physical like going on, and I feel like it's just so important to find a little bit of time in your day. At least for me, I found that it's really, really like helpful to just have 10 minutes of like, it doesn't have to be productive. It's just like you just are listening a little closer, and you're paying attention to how you breathe. That was a really weird thing when I started it. Like I've never paid attention to how I breathe before, and it's just very like nothing needs to change. It's just it almost felt uncomfortable. Like am I doing it right? Am I doing this whole breathing thing right?
That's great.
And you're just supposed to breathe normal. It's not like a technique necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would say take 10 minutes a day, and try to be more familiar with your surroundings. But that Headspace app was a really helpful tool for that for me.
Man, these are really good recommendations. I like this. I'm gonna bring these into my own life right now.
What's so funny is I don't do either of these things. These are just things that sound like other people should do. I'm too busy. No, I'm just kidding. It is terrible. Like I've been trying to do more of the head. Like I started the Headspace thing I was doing it maybe for like 2 months straight, and then I'm just now getting back into it because the world got a little bit I just didn't prioritize it, and then it slipped. So, and I noticed it. I noticed a difference. So when I do it, it's a make some clearer headspace. No, again, I guess that's why the app's called that.
That's a good endorsement. There we go. Ryan, this has seriously been so good. I'm so glad that we got to hang out today, and I really admire everything you're doing.
Thank you. Likewise, seriously. I'm a huge fan, and I am excited to get to have this conversation.
Thanks, man. If people want to find your music online, if they want to follow along with what you do, where can they do that?
Yeah, so sleepingatlast.com is my website. Do people go to websites anymore?
I'm not sure. I really hope so. I spent a lot of time building mine.
Good. Yeah, I did too. So hopefully, if people, and for any website viewers, sleepingatlast.com, and then pretty much Sleeping at Last on all of the social media. So Instagram is Sleeping at Last, at Sleeping at Last on Twitter, and then I just started Snapchatting recently.
Yes,
and
welcome.
I'm a huge fan of your Snapchatting abilities. You're so much better at it than I am. But I'm trying to keep up.
You're doing awesome. And on Snapchat, you don't have Sleeping at Last, do you? You've got a different name.
That's true. Thank you for telling me that and reminding me, because I was frustrated when I found that out. It's Sleeping at Last 1.
Oh, I mean that's probably the best thing you could have done.
It's I was like, official sleeping. No, that's too long.
Oh wait, is it too late for you to change it to Snapping at Last?
Snap. Oh, no. I'm gonna do it unless somebody beats me to it.
Oh, I won't release this until you do that.
Yeah, just hold off until I can get my Snapping at Last name.
Well, Ryan, seriously, this has been so good. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Seriously, it's been a treat.
Sounds Good with Branden Harvey is part of the Gradient Podcast Network and is created in collaboration between me, Branden Harvey, and Gradient. Check them out at gradient.is. That's gradient.is. Thank you so very much for tuning into the podcast this week. If you liked this week's episode, make sure you hit subscribe and share the episode with your friends. You can tweet about it, you can Instagram about it, whatever. I'd be honored by that. Outside of this podcast, you can find me basically everywhere on the internet. Just Google my name. That's Branden with an E-N. And with that, that's a wrap for this week's podcast. I'll see you next week when we get the opportunity to learn from another incredible person. Sound good?